Ethan Hale had long ago stopped asking people to like him. On Karth 9, everyone knew his name, but nobody used it kindly. To most people, he was simply Filthy Ethan, the maintenance worker who spent his days crawling through reactor shafts and waste tunnels. Whenever he entered a cafe, conversations quieted. Whenever he sat somewhere public, empty seats appeared around him as if by magic. At first, the rejection had hurt. Then it had become normal. Now it was simply part of life. That evening, Ethan sat alone in a small diner near the spaceport. Across the room, a group of corporate employees laughed loudly as they discussed vacation planets and luxury orbital resorts. One of them glanced at Ethan. "Careful," the man joked. "If he sits any closer, the cleaning robots might mistake him for garbage." The table erupted with laughter. Ethan lowered his eyes and continued eating. He was tired, not angry, just tired. A small service robot beside him rolled forward. "Congratulations," Bolt said. "You have once again been voted least popular human on the planet." Ethan sighed. "Only this planet. I'm trying to stay optimistic." Despite himself, Ethan smiled. The robot considered that a victory. Outside, endless streams of spacecraft crossed the night sky. Every ship seemed to be carrying someone important somewhere important. Ethan had never been important. He paid his bill and walked toward the industrial district where he worked. His communicator remained silent. No messages, no invitations, no family. Years earlier, his parents had moved to another colony. His younger brother had become successful and rarely contacted him anymore. The galaxy felt crowded with billions of people, yet Ethan had never felt more alone. The next morning began like every other: repairs, maintenance, endless work. Near midday, however, an emergency signal appeared on an abandoned section of the old spaceport. Most workers ignored it. Ethan did not. Hours later, he found the source. A damaged escape pod rested beneath collapsed metal structures. The vessel was unlike anything he had ever seen. Alien. Its surface shimmered with unfamiliar symbols. The hatch was partially open. Inside lay a young woman. For a moment, Ethan thought she was human. Then he noticed her ears, long and elegant. Unlike anything found among humans, her eyes remained closed. Her breathing was weak. "Well," Bolt said, scanning the pod, "either we've discovered an alien princess, or I've finally developed a vivid imagination." Ethan immediately activated emergency medical protocols. The woman's condition was worsening. Official procedure required him to report the discovery. Instead, he hesitated. Something about her situation felt wrong. The pod had clearly been attacked. If the wrong people found her first, she might become a prisoner rather than a patient. For reasons he couldn't explain, Ethan made a decision. He would help her himself. Hours later, she rested safely inside his apartment. Medical scanners monitored her condition while Bolt repeatedly complained about becoming an unlicensed nurse. Near midnight, the woman finally opened her eyes. She looked around cautiously before focusing on Ethan. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then she whispered, "You saved me." Her voice was soft but steady. Ethan nodded. "You were injured." Most people who met Ethan for the first time reacted the same way. They noticed his worn clothes, his rough appearance, the smell of machinery that never completely left his skin. They judged him instantly. This woman did not. Instead, she smiled. A simple smile, nothing more, yet it felt strangely unfamiliar. When was the last time someone had smiled at him like that? "I am Lyra," she said. "Ethan." "Thank you, Ethan." The words were ordinary, but something about them stayed with him. No mockery, no disgust, no pity, just gratitude. Bolt rolled into the room. "Excellent, she's conscious. Now perhaps someone can explain why we're hiding a mysterious alien in an apartment barely large enough for 2 humans and 1 underappreciated robot." Lyra laughed, a genuine laugh. Bolt immediately froze. "Oh no." "What?" Ethan asked. "The alien laughed at my joke." "So, I'm funny." The robot sounded horrified. Lyra laughed harder. For the first time in years, Ethan joined in. The apartment filled with laughter. Small, unexpected, real. As the night continued, Ethan learned very little about her. She avoided questions about her past and where she came from, yet somehow conversation flowed easily. Hours passed without either noticing. Eventually, Lyra studied him quietly. "You seem lonely." The words caught him off guard. Most people looked at him and saw dirt. She had looked deeper. Ethan forced a smile. I manage. Lyra shook her head. No, you endure. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she offered her hand, a simple gesture, nothing romantic, nothing dramatic. Yet Ethan felt something shift inside him, not love, not yet, something gentler, the feeling of being seen. For the first time in many years, someone looked at Ethan Hale and did not see a man who was unwanted. She simply saw Ethan, and neither of them realized that this small moment would become the beginning of a story that would change both their lives forever. The days that followed felt unfamiliar to Ethan. For years, every morning had been identical. He woke up alone, worked alone, ate alone, and returned home alone. Now someone was waiting for him. The realization unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. Lyra spent most of her time recovering, but her curiosity never seemed to rest. She asked questions about everything. Human customs, human relationships, human dreams. One evening, she watched Ethan repairing an old household processor. Why do you keep fixing things that are broken? She asked. Because someone has to. No, she replied. I think it's because you believe everything deserves a second chance. Ethan laughed softly. Machines, maybe. And people. He didn't answer. Lyra noticed. As days turned into weeks, their lives slowly intertwined. When Ethan returned from work, she would be waiting with questions about his day. When Lyra struggled to understand human technology, Ethan patiently explained it. Neither of them noticed how much they had begun relying on those conversations. One night they sat together on the apartment roof while transport ships crossed the sky. My world is different from yours, Lyra said. You miss it. Every day. Ethan nodded. He understood missing something. What was it like? For a long moment she remained silent. Then she spoke. She told him about crystal cities suspended above oceans, about starships grown rather than built, about families whose bloodlines stretched back thousands of years. Ethan listened quietly. The more she revealed, the clearer the truth became. She came from privilege beyond anything he could imagine. Meanwhile, he lived in a tiny apartment and spent his days crawling through maintenance shafts. The difference between them felt impossible. You should have been rescued already, Ethan finally said. Lyra looked at him. Maybe I was. Their eyes met. Neither looked away immediately. The silence that followed felt different, not uncomfortable, not awkward, dangerous, because both of them understood something neither was ready to say aloud. Bolt interrupted the moment. Good news. I have analyzed your emotional patterns. Ethan groaned. Please don't. The probability that you two are developing romantic feelings has reached 87%. Lyra burst into laughter. Ethan buried his face in his hands. I am going to dismantle you. Violence is often the final refuge of embarrassed humans. For several minutes, neither Ethan nor Lyra could stop laughing. Yet later, after the laughter faded, the words remained. Romantic feelings. Neither denied them. Weeks passed. Then everything changed. One morning, Lyra's damaged communicator finally activated. A projection appeared above the device. Several alien officials stood within the hologram. Their expressions immediately shifted when they saw her. Lady Lyra. Ethan felt his stomach tight. The title alone revealed more than she had ever told him. The conversation was brief. Her people had been searching for her. A recovery vessel was already on its way. It would arrive within days. After the transmission ended, silence filled the apartment. Neither knew what to say. The future they had quietly built together suddenly had an expiration date. That evening, Ethan left for work without speaking much. The next day was no better. Neither wanted to discuss the approaching departure. Both feared the answer. Finally, 3 days later, Lyra found him sitting alone near the spaceport. You've been avoiding me. Ethan looked away. You'll be leaving soon. Yes. You belong with your people. Lyra stepped closer. And where do you belong? He laughed bitterly. You know the answer to that. No, she said softly. I don't. For years, Ethan had believed he belonged nowhere. The words had become part of him, yet hearing them spoken aloud suddenly hurt, more than he expected. Lyra sat beside him. When I first woke up here, I was afraid. You hid it well. I was terrified. She smiled faintly. But then I saw you. Ethan looked at her. You saved me. I only helped. No, you gave me something much bigger than that. Her voice grew quieter. You made me feel safe. Neither moved, neither spoke. Ships crossed the sky above them. Time continued moving forward, yet neither wanted the moment to end. Because for the first time since meeting, they both understood the truth. The coming separation frightened them, not because they would lose a friend, but because somewhere along the way, friendship had become something much deeper. And neither knew whether love would survive the distance between two worlds. The recovery vessel arrived 2 days later. News spread across Karth 9 faster than anyone expected. An alien noble had been hiding on the colony for weeks. The same people who had ignored Ethan for years suddenly wanted interviews, explanations, and access. For the first time in his life, people knew his name. Ironically, it happened only because of someone else. As officials prepared for Lyra's departure, Ethan buried himself in work. He convinced himself it was easier that way. If he stayed busy, he wouldn't have to think about goodbye. Unfortunately, reality refused to cooperate. The evening before the departure, Lyra found him repairing a damaged cargo scanner. "You always hide when something matters," she said. Ethan didn't look up. "I'm working." "No, you're running." He finally met her gaze. "What do you want me to say?" "The truth." The answer came before he could stop it. "I don't want you to leave." Silence followed, not uncomfortable silence. Honest silence. Lyra stepped closer. "Then why haven't you said that until now?" Ethan laughed quietly. "Because you're Lyra. And you're important." Her expression softened. "And you're not." He shook his head. "You don't understand." "No, Ethan. I do understand." For weeks she had watched him doubt himself. For weeks she had watched him believe the lies others had told him. The lies had become his identity. That was the real prison. Not the colony, not his circumstances. His own belief that he was unworthy. Before either could continue, alarms suddenly echoed through the spaceport. Emergency signals flashed across the colony network. Unknown vessels had entered orbit. The attackers who had destroyed Lyra's transport had finally found her. Within minutes, panic spread across Karth 9. The colony's defense systems struggled to respond. Citizens rushed toward shelters. Government officials argued. Nobody seemed prepared. Ethan immediately understood something others did not. The attackers were targeting the old quantum relay network beneath the city. If they gained control, they could disable planetary defenses. Without hesitation, he acted. Together with Lyra and Bolt, he entered maintenance tunnels that few people even remembered existed. The route was dangerous. The situation was desperate, yet Ethan never hesitated. Not once. Along the way, Bolt continued complaining. "I would like the official record to show that I strongly oppose heroic activities." "No one asked," Ethan replied. "I know, that's what makes this friendship so one-sided." Even Lyra laughed despite the danger. Hours later, they reached the central relay core. The attackers had already begun infiltrating the system. Using years of experience that nobody had ever valued, Ethan bypassed security barriers, rerouted power grids, and restored defensive controls. The same maintenance skills people mocked every day became the key to saving the colony. Moments later, Karth 9 orbital defenses activated. The hostile vessels retreated. The crisis ended. And for the first time, everyone saw Ethan differently. Not as filthy Ethan, not as a joke, as the man who had saved them. The following day, the alien recovery vessel stood ready to depart. Crowds gathered throughout the spaceport. Ethan watched quietly. This time he wasn't hiding. He wasn't running. He had changed. Not because people finally respected him, but because he no longer needed their approval. Lyra approached him. The crowd fell silent. "My people want me to return home," she said. Ethan nodded. "I know." She smiled. "There's one problem." "What problem?" Lyra extended her hand. "I already found home." For a moment, Ethan couldn't speak. Years of loneliness. Years of rejection. Years of believing he belonged nowhere. All of it seemed distant now. "You mean?" "I mean you." Tears filled several eyes in the crowd. Bolt emitted a mechanical groan. "Oh no, this is becoming emotional." Nobody listened. Lyra continued, "I want you to come with me." Ethan looked at the waiting vessel, then at her. For the first time in his life, the future didn't frighten him, because he wasn't facing it alone. He took her hand. The crowd watched as they boarded together. A human once rejected by his own world. An alien woman who had crossed the stars. Two people who should never have met, yet somehow found each other. As the vessel lifted from Karth 9 and disappeared into the vast galaxy, Ethan looked toward the countless worlds ahead. He had spent years searching for acceptance. In the end, he found something greater. Love. And for the first time in his life, he finally understood that home was never a place. It was the person who chose to stay. 10 years passed. Ethan sometimes found it difficult to believe how much his life had changed. The man once known as Filthy Ethan no longer existed, except in old records and fading memories on Karth 9. Life on Illyria had not been easy at first. Many members of Lyra's world had viewed him the same way humans once had. As an outsider, as someone unworthy, as someone who did not belong. The difference was that Ethan no longer believed them. Years earlier, those opinions would have destroyed him. Now they were only noise. Because every morning he woke beside someone who knew his worth. That changed everything. His relationship with Lyra survived every challenge that followed: political opposition, cultural differences, public scrutiny, distance from the world he once called home. They faced each obstacle together. Eventually, the resistance faded. People learned to respect what they could not break. Love became difficult to argue against when it endured year after year. Bolt adapted surprisingly well to life among the Illyrians. He upgraded himself repeatedly and somehow became even more annoying. I have achieved intellectual superiority over 89% of this planet. You said that yesterday. It increased by 2%. No, it didn't. Bolt paused. It might have decreased. Years passed, then decades. Technology continued advancing. Human and Illyrian scientists developed temporal communication networks capable of transmitting information across vast stretches of space almost instantly. Medical breakthroughs extended lifespans. Diseases disappeared. Entire generations grew up in a galaxy that looked very different from the one Ethan had known. Yet time never truly stopped. One evening, many years later, Ethan sat with Lyra overlooking a sea of lights from one of Illyria's great cities. Their hair carried traces of age now. Their faces carried traces of experience. Neither regretted any of it. "Do you ever miss Karth 9? Lyra asked. "Sometimes." "Would you go back?" Ethan smiled. "To visit, not to stay." He shook his head. No, because it was true. Karth 9 had shaped him, but it was no longer home. Home sat beside him. Lyra reached for his hand. The gesture remained unchanged despite the passing decades. Neither of them spoke for a while. Neither needed to. Some forms of love eventually move beyond words. Years later, another challenge emerged. Scientists experimenting with temporal gateways accidentally discovered something extraordinary. The technology could open brief windows into the past, not enough to alter history, only enough to observe. The discovery fascinated the entire galaxy. Most people wanted to witness historical events, ancient wars, political revolutions, scientific breakthroughs. Ethan wanted something different. He wanted to see himself, not the version he had become, the version he used to be, the lonely maintenance worker sitting alone in a diner on Karth 9, the man who believed nobody would ever choose him. The request shocked researchers, but eventually they agreed. The temporal window opened. For a few minutes, Ethan watched his younger self. There he was, sitting alone, ignoring cruel laughter, trying not to show how much it hurt. The sight struck him harder than he expected. For years, he had tried to forget that person. Now he realized something. He didn't hate that version of himself. He felt compassion for him, because he knew what came next. Lyra stood beside him during the observation, quietly watching. "You want to tell him, don't you?" she asked. Ethan nodded. The rules of the experiment prevented communication. History could not be changed, yet he still wished he could speak, just once. Just a few words: "Hold on, keep going, she is coming." The temporal window closed. The past disappeared, but the feeling remained. That night, Ethan understood something he never had before. The lonely man he once was had not vanished. He had become part of the person standing here now. Every rejection, every failure, every painful moment. Without them, he never would have found Lyra. Without them, he never would have become himself. Time continued moving forward, as it always does. Another 20 years passed, then 30. Eventually, even advanced medicine reached its limits. One quiet evening, Ethan sat beside Lyra in their home. Both understood what was coming. Neither feared it. Fear belonged to younger people, to people uncertain about whether their lives mattered. Ethan no longer carried that uncertainty. "I used to think I was forgotten," he said softly. Lyra squeezed his hand. "I know. I used to think nobody would ever love me." She smiled. I know that too. He looked at her, and then you arrived. Tears formed in Lyra's eyes. You saved me first. No. Ethan gently shook his head. You saved me. The silence that followed was peaceful, complete, the kind of silence earned after a life fully lived. Years later, stories about Ethan Hale spread across both civilizations, not because he saved Karth-9, not because he helped unite worlds, not because he challenged powerful people. Those accomplishments mattered, but they weren't what people remembered most. They remembered a simple truth. A man rejected by his own kind found someone who saw his value. And because one person chose kindness instead of judgment, countless lives changed afterward. Long after Ethan was gone, students learned his story. Children heard it from their parents. Travelers shared it between stars. The details changed with every retelling, but the heart of the story remained the same. Somewhere in the galaxy, a lonely person might believe they are unwanted. Somewhere in the galaxy, another person might be searching for them. And sometimes, against all odds, those two people find each other. The stars continued shining. Ships continued crossing the darkness. New generations continued writing their own stories. But far beyond the passing of years, beyond worlds and civilizations, beyond time itself, the choice that changed Ethan Hale's life never disappeared. Someone looked at him and stayed, and that was enough. The end.